Well, let me tell you about the other thing that everybody was calling a ladder. It's not a ladder, it's a number. Again, this is another style of pentatic number. And if you look in that same book of David King's, this table right here lists a couple of examples of how they use pentatic numbers. It's very simple. It's finger counting. You go a bar all the way across, that's 10. If you go to the right, if you go to the left, it's 5. If you go to the right, it's 1. So look at that. What have you got? 4 bars going all the way across, 4 going to the right, 44. And when I figured that, when I put this together, I went, oh my God. And I ran and I got an atlas. And I said, where were these things found? You'll never guess. Here's Pompano Beach, Spirit Pond. That line of latitude is 44 degrees. And the next one down below is 42, so 43 is roughly in the middle. You know what? That's close enough for me. These things are found at that latitude. So what I think the Mapstone is saying is, here's the map, and on the back side it says, this is good land, this is what's here, and this is where it's at. There's no magic there, is there? That was pretty exciting, I have to tell you. There has been some archaeology done there, and I've actually talked to the guy standing in the middle, Ed Lennick, an archaeologist who worked on that dig. There were a couple of trenches that were dwellings that they found, and they dug one of them up. I'm not sure, I'm not clear if they did a dig on the second site, but I know they dug the one site. And I read the report and I saw something very interesting. And the way they described these dwellings is they were dwellings that were dug into the hill, and I don't have the terminology down right, but they basically dug a trench and then they put a peaked timber roof. And the roofs had collapsed, and they dated the wood to around 1600. Now, I subsequently learned that there was a settlement attempted at Pompano Beach in 1607. I don't know if I have that right. It was right around that time, but it failed. And of course, we all know about Jamestown and Plymouth Rock, but most people don't know about the settlement at Pompano Beach. It makes me wonder, did they know about that place? And that's the first place they tried to settle? That's a question I don't know the answer. But the one thing that really caught my eye was that they also tested a piece of wood, one of the floorboards from this dwelling, and it dated to 1405, plus or minus 95 years. Well, that date didn't mean anything to anybody after Einar Haugen's opinion, but guess what? Suddenly now it takes on renewed interest, I would think. And I would like to see somebody, any of the archaeologists here, if you can get anybody fired up, you should go back and take a look at this site. I think you'll find something if you look. Well, here are my conclusions. The composition and the retooling of the inscription makes any weathering studies that I might be able to do pretty difficult, at least at this point in time. The inscriptions are dated of 1401, 1402, not 1010. Changes the context of the message. And also, funny, all these features I talked about, everything falls right into place with that time period. It's consistent with it. The texts were clearly not copied from the Kensington Runestone. The barred runes represent the dotted runes, 7 of the 8 on the Astrolabe in Småland, Sweden. The numerous language features are certainly consistent with this time period, 1400s, contemporaneous with the Kensington Runestone for sure. And the orientation with east at the top is consistent with medieval maps. But this is the one here, this is the magic bullet as far as I'm concerned. The geographical accuracy of the Mapstone and the Astrolabe-derived latitude of 44 degrees found on one Astrolabe in the whole world that dates to this time period, in my opinion, makes a modern hoax impossible. And so my opinion is they're genuine. And I put some flowery language here, and I worded it this way because this is the way that Newton Winchell wrote his opinion about the KRS, so I'm paying tribute to him. Well, here we are at Spirit Pond. Is there any more? Well, yes, there is. There's another inscription down here in Narragansett Bay. And Narragansett Bay is about a 2-day sail from Pompano Beach, with favorable weather, of course. And what do we have? We have a boulder that is still sitting in the surf today that has a runic inscription on it. This picture was taken 2 weeks ago at extreme low tide. And what do you see? The hooked X. The hooked X is what ties these all together. Now, this is a relatively short inscription that has been translated by Dick Nielsen to be "Such Starvation for Men." And there are some really amazing, unique features on this stone. Some people can't even get out of the starting gate with claiming that it was copied from either the Kensington Stone or Spirit Pond, because guess what? Of these 9 runes here, only 3 of them are found on those stones. The rest of them are totally unique. One example I'll give you is, you see the R? Do you see how it comes all the way back and connects with the main stave? That's not found on either of the Spirit Pond or Kensington Stones. So the devil's in the details. You got to look at the details, and it'll tell you what's going on. There's another example of the hooked X that showed up in Sweden in 2004, after we brought the rune stone to Sweden, the Kensington Stone. And this document, I could go on for a long time about this document, but what I'll tell you is that Edward Larson, whose name appears at the bottom, was a tailor. And in 1885, he was a young man who was a member of a tailor's guild. And he was probably a Freemason. And the reason we think he was a Freemason is because neither of these alphabets have been seen before. I just want to point out the X symbol for A, which had never been seen in Sweden before. Here's another example of it. And we have the hooked X in this runic alphabet here. And if you look carefully at those runes, especially towards the tail end of that Futhork, you'll see a lot of hooks on the runes. Now, there are other unique features here. These are all ruins that are found on the Kensington Runestone. And of course, what did the scholars do in Scandinavia? Boy, they jumped all over this and said, aha, somebody in Scandinavia could have taken this alphabet and come over to Minnesota and used it to carve the Kensington Runestone. Well, you know what? Close, but no cigar. You remember the magic bullet on the Kensington Runestone, the dotted R? It doesn't appear here. So I guess the point I would like to make here is that this appears to be a Masonic document. It says right here in Swedish, this is the secret style that goes way back. And we talked about this whole culture of secrecy that was going on with these mariners and sailors, and certainly within Freemasonry. But I want you to remember that term, Freemasonry. Do they have secrets? Maybe. The other known example of the hooked X is found in a guy that we're all very familiar with. And as far as I know, I'm the first person, and Dick, to point this out. He has the hooked X in his coded sigla that appears after he came back from the New World. Now you'll notice that, you see all those dots? If you look at those 2 siglas, they're not the same, are they? Remember the dots we talked about in the runestone? Now I don't know if there's a connection here or not, but again, more beer cans, I guess, huh? Interestingly enough, somebody talked about, I don't remember now, that I think it was you, Martin, that said Columbus had the Templar cross on his sails. Well, actually, it's the Knight of Christ sails, which is the order that was founded after the Templars were put down in 1307. Actually, they weren't founded. They just changed their name and went on as usual. And their main seed was at Tomar in Portugal. And you can see the Templar cross to the left, or one version of it, and the Knight of Christ crossed on the right. So we've got a connection here with the Knights of Christ, apparently, with Columbus. And I know that there's people out there who know Manuel Luciano da Silva, who is absolutely convinced that Columbus was a Portuguese. And I think he's probably right. And certainly was a member of the Knights of Christ. His father-in-law was a Grand Master with the Knights of Christ. He absolutely had a map, in my opinion, and I think he knew exactly where he was going. Let's talk about some of the facts. The KRS and Spirit Pond are consistent with the medieval runic record. In other words, there's no reason to believe they're not absolutely genuine. The Narragansett Runestone clearly was not copied from the KRS or the Spirit Pond, and is very likely medieval.